Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this is another bonus episode made possible by my patrons over on patreon.com/HJDoom. Before we get into the serious business of this episode's gamebook, I'm delighted to be able to announce that the generosity of my patrons means I've finally restarted my other podcast, Popular Antiquarian. That's a podcast where I look at strange and forgotten bits of pop culture and take them way too seriously. It's almost like I've got a thing. Season 2 will be focusing on the films of The Asylum, the production company behind such classic movies as Transmorphers, Titanic 2, Sharknado, and countless other movies, most of which bear more than an accidental resemblance to currently popular films. It's a deep dive into a world of mockbusters and low-budget horror that will probably eventually drive me mad. You can listen to Popular Antiquarian wherever fine quality pods are cast, or by going to the website at hauntedphonograph.com. Watching an Asylum movie a week might be an even stupider idea than trying to play every single fighting fantasy book, so I hope you'll consider listening along. Huge thanks to my patrons who in no way asked me to do this, but who are collectively somewhat responsible for making me want to do additional content. Also, a big thank you to a new patron, Chris Newton, who added their support this month. Thanks so much for that, Chris. Now, on with the show. Way of the Tiger Redeemer is the 8th and last book in the Way of the Tiger series of ninja-themed gamebooks that were mostly written by Mark Smith and Jamie Thompson in the late 80s. Originally, it was supposed to be a 7-volume series, but a fractious publishing relationship curtailed the original run to 6 entries and left a generation of players to ruminate on a downbeat cliffhanger ending. Thankfully, a mere 27 years later, in 2014, 2 new entries were written. A prequel, written by David Walters, called Ninja, which we played ages ago now, and which was really good, and a sequel, written by Walters alongside Smith and Thompson, which I currently have next to me. This really is the end of what has been a fascinating journey through the world of Orb and several different genres. We started doing pure ninja stuff before overthrowing the ruler of a city, dabbling in statecraft, commanding armies in the field, and finishing with a fairly pure but awesome dungeon delve. I'm thrilled to find out how this epic saga concludes, and thanks as always must go to Stuart Lloyd for the loan of the special edition version of the text, which is a handsome hardcover volume with a really rather well executed painting of a white tiger on the front, which might just be my favourite cover in the entire run. I'm really looking forward to this one. Art is by Sebastian Brunet, Aud Pfister, Eric Chaussin, Uzun and Mylene Villeneuve. Let's take a quick look at the rules. I'm not going to belabour this on Book 8. If you've listened to the previous episodes, you know what the rules are, but a very, very quick rundown is you've got a punch, kick and throw modifier for doing different attacks. You've got 20 endurance, and if all that goes, you're dead. Attacks are made on 2d6 against a target number, and you do varied amounts of damage depending on what attack you've used. Throws do no damage, but can make it easier to hit your opponent on the next round of combat. If your enemy isn't dead, they get to attack you in the same way. You can block some incoming attacks in exchange for a negative modifier to your next attack roll. Finally, you can spend Inner Force to do double damage, and you start with 5 Inner Force. You have a selection of ninja skills. You always know Shuriken Jutsu, which is throwing shuriken at people, but you also get 4 other skills drawn from a list, of which I've chosen Yubi Jutsu, which allows me to strike at pressure points on my opponent during combat, acrobatics, which is jumping around, climbing, which is climbing, and the ever-popular poison needles, which lets me spit tiny poison needles at people and potentially kill them before a ruck even begins. Lastly, you've got a bunch of ninja equipment, 5 shuriken, a bamboo breathing tube, some ordinary poison, and 1 dose of something called the Blood of Nil, which is a proper hardcore poison so deadly that only 1 person has ever lived through it. We also get one use of flash powder, which allows you to vanish in a puff of smoke. Technically, it just creates the puff of smoke, but hopefully if you run fast enough, it will look like you vanished by the time the smoke has cleared. You can play the same character all the way through the series, and that will have some bearing on the skills and equipment that you have, and the modifiers you might have improved. But because I always end up playing the books in a bit of a weird way in order to thoroughly review them, I can't generally work out exactly what I had on my first successful playthrough, so I've just gone with what feels about right with regard to previous books. With all that out of the way, let's play Way of the Tiger, Redeemer. Background. As a reminder, in the last book, we had successfully defended Erzmancast, the city we were always destined to rule, from a terrible assault from creatures spawned in the bowels of Orb. We had a little bit of peace, but it was not to last. Things started to take a bad turn when the former spy mistress Foxglove arrived in chains at the hands of the swordswoman Cassandra. They informed you that your friend Glyvus was caught in the rift. Doré Lejeune had accompanied him, but his fate was lost to the world. Without Glavis' help in the past, Quan would have been condemned to burn in Inferno for all eternity, so you had to go. Quan being, of course, our god and patron. You descended into the festering chasm of evil known as the Rift, home to the darkest creatures on Orb, with only the magical torch of Lumen to light your path. Your goal was to rescue Glyvus from the forbidden sanctuary below the 7th tier. You met two groups of adventurers along the way. The first are allies: Eris the mage, Tybalt the priest of Avatar, Toffler the priest of Illustra, and Vespers the swordsman. But fortune has also thrown you together with your enemies, the chaotic followers of Anarkil, Cassandra, Tuchev, and the illusionist Thaum. Your groups descended inside the world's worm, its maw only held open by wedging it with Cassandra's sword, and now you find yourself trapped on the 7th tier of the rift, far away from sunlight and hope, cocooned in gossamer. The gargantuan form of the Black Widow, queen of the evils of the rift, twitches on the web and scuttles towards you to bring your long and grueling journey to an abrupt end. We turn to section 1. The torch of Lumen on your belt remains dark, and your only light source is a pale, sickly white light from somewhere above. You can just make out the forms of your companions, allies and enemies alike, suspended like you in webbing. You see now that you are in a vast cave of onyx, and your descent into the web was halted a mere body length above the ground. Nearby are other humanoid shapes of various sizes, all engulfed in gossamer, some clearly long dead. Your gem-inlaid sceptre hangs nearby in webbing, its mace-like head bearing your family emblem of a hippogriff, a golden treasure that you dare not lose to the Black Widow's lair. You twist and strain against the gossamer cocoon and manage to free your legs, but a monstrous shape scuttles towards you across the webbing. It is the Black Widow. And there is a picture of the Black Widow. It's a big spider. It's a really, really big spider. You can see it lurking out of the darkness, sort of sickly green-tinged darkness, and there's this tiny figure wrapped in threads, no bigger than the tip of one of the mandibles of this awful, monstrous spider. I think it's genuinely one of the best bits of art we've seen in the entire run of the Way of the Tiger special editions. It is cracking, and I'm someone who's basically fine with spiders up to a point. I'm fine with little spiders, absolutely no issue whatsoever. And then they get to a certain size and a little switch flicks in my brain and they're very much not okay anymore. But yeah, that's the situation we're in. A genuinely building-sized spider creeping towards us. So we've got some questions. If you played Book 6 Inferno and your emerald eye was gouged out by Cassandra, then something will happen. If not, then something else will happen. If Foxglove fell with you onto this web after either travelling at your side or being Cassandra's prisoner, I cannot remember whether or not Foxglove was there on my successful playthrough or not. I have a feeling she wasn't. So if not, you notice at the periphery of your vision that your companions are desperately trying to free themselves without much success. So that is what we will go for. I'm pretty sure I've still got my emerald eye. Yeah, one of my eyes got put out in a previous book, but was then thankfully replaced with a magical emerald, which was very nice. Your companions remain held fast, but Vespers uses his blade Manmaster in a soaring motion, bursting out from his webbing and grimly positioning himself between his friends and the Black Widow. The Black Widow pauses, 8 legs twitching, her dozen sanguineous eyes reflecting only death. Vespers cries out in defiance and strikes at the maw that lunges forward at him in a sudden rush. Vesper's head is bitten clean off, and his sword is snapped like kindling in the Black Widow's enormous mandibles. You are showered in blood. Vesper's doomed stand has brought you a moment to act, nothing more. So we've got a number of options. We can call out a prayer to Quan for deliverance. We can wriggle the blood of Nil free from our clothes, catch it between our feet and launch it into the Black Widow's gaping maw. Are spiders immune to poison? It sort of feels as though they should be immune to poison, but that also doesn't make any sense. Simply producing poison doesn't in any way make you immune to it. I sort of like that idea because it is a pretty awesome bit of action movie nonsense. We could also command the Torch of Lumen on our belt to flare with light, which has got a nice Lord of the Rings vibe to it, which I do like. Lastly, we could feign death if we have the skill. I didn't pick that skill. Or we could flick the Onyx Spider token into the Black Widow's gaping maw, and if you have it and wish to see if it is used for this purpose. Yeah, I think Vesper's tragic death, what a way to sell the threat of this giant spider. Really, really cool. Really nicely written as well. I think we're going to try the old Blood of Nil. We'll wriggle it free and kick it into the spider's mouth. You lean back and use your feet to launch the Blood of Nil into the large open maw of the Black Widow. Cross it off from your character sheet. The glass breaks, and the terrible poison causes the Black Widow to shudder, black tendrils of smoke coming out of her mouth. Still, she overcomes the dose to scuttle in, her 6 red eyes glowing. So that makes, I think, literally 0 people we've managed to kill with the Blood of Nil. It's been sold to us as the ultimate in poisons. None can stand against it, apart from literally everyone we've tried to kill with it. You turn away from the sight of the pulsing venom sac in her mouth, the putrid stench of her breath in your face. She lashes out with one of her legs and you duck as well as you can, yet her foot grates across your head. Pain explodes in your face, blood streaming, and only your iron will keeps you clinging to consciousness. The vision in your good eye is blurred and will take time to heal, leaving you partially reliant on your green orb eye. Lose 6 endurance and that you cannot use the skill of arrow cutting until your face is healed. That's fine. I don't have that skill anyway. Endurance now 14. The Black Widow rears up in front of you, Chelicerae clacking in her mouth to form a horrible sound akin to human speech. It reverberates around the chamber. Avenger! You are in desperate need of salvation against this great embodiment of evil. If you played Book 3 Usurper and were pursued by Everyman the Golem, that's a thing. I did play it. Which one was Book 3? Yeah, I think I was not pursued by every man on my successful playthrough. If you were not pursued by every man but played Book 5, Warbringer, and allied yourself with the Spires of Foreshadowing, I genuinely cannot recall what happened on my successful playthrough of that. It took me a lot of goes to get through Warbringer. Otherwise, if you played Book 0 Ninja, Book 1 Avenger, or Book 3 Usurper and have encountered the Spirit Tiger of Quan, then something happens. Well, I definitely encountered the Spirit Tiger of Quan in at least one of those, so that is what we will do. A tremendous roar fills the cavern, a sound of hope echoing in this pit of despair. A sinuous form takes shape above the ground before you. It is a flawless tiger, its fur as white as fresh snow, its eyes pools of ice blue. It is the Spirit Tiger of Quan. Quan has not abandoned his most devoted child, but his aid comes at a price. Deduct 1 point of inner force as the Spirit Tiger draws upon your spiritual strength to enable it to materialise here in the plane of life and so far from the lands of Quan's worship. Inner force now 4. The Spirit Tiger springs at the Black Widow, claws raking and teeth slicing into the black monstrosity, ichor spraying out. The Black Widow dwarfs the Spirit Tiger, though, and this is her domain, and so you doubt how long the servant of Quan will be able to help you. Already the tiger's flanks are bloody from the strikes of the taloned legs of the Black Widow. With your enemy distracted, you now have the chance to escape, if you can. Do you have escapology? I do not. You can try and use inner force, you can try and use the Onyx Spider token, otherwise you must use a shuriken or your garrote to try and cut through the webbing. Inner force, I think, is going to be the best way forward. This is very exciting. You free yourself from the webbing as the Black Widow fights on. To your right, Eris the wizard has cast a spell which radiates fire from his hands, burning through his webbing and that of his friend Torfla, and together they pull Tybalt free. The fire of Eris's magic spreads against his design and frees Cassandra and Chuchev, the latter of whom cuts Thorm free with his sword. You start forward and grab the sceptre from where it hangs in gossamer before you. The Black Widow scuttles as she fights, forcing the group to scatter, and they flee for the escape tunnels nearest to them. Toffler and Tybalt have escaped on the far side of the Black Widow, and to follow them would be suicide through the battle that rages in the middle of the chamber. Do you want to rush after Eris down a tunnel further ahead, rush down the nearest tunnel after Cassandra, or rush for the side cave mouth with the low ceiling after Chuchev and Thorm? Cassandra might be a wrong 'un and a diabolical follower of chaos, but she is pretty good at the old staying alive thing, so I think I might follow Cassandra. You race downhill along an increasingly narrow passageway, pursuing Cassandra as the din of battle in the Black Widow's lair recedes. You are painfully aware that the schemes of the Black Widow have led you to this nightmare place far below ground, and all the denizens of the Rift now seek to prevent you from finding Glyvus and escaping. You make the torch of Lumen at your belt illuminate the darkness, and Cassandra whirls, ready to spring panther-like, her eyes assessing you. You see that she is unarmed, her sword lost in the Worldworm during your descent to this tier of the Rift. Make a fate roll, so that is a 7+. You do get a fate modifier. My fate modifier is currently 0, so 2d6, let's see what happens. 8, that is fate smiling upon me. I have no desire to help you, Avenger, Cassandra says, but I do have a strong desire to be free from this hole where the Black Widow will take all the spoils. I propose a truce until we reach the upper levels. You comment that you do not trust her. I have no sword, she says, spreading her hands wide. Yes, I admit I could use your help to fight my way free until I meet up with Thorm and Tuchev, but in return, I can give you knowledge of the Rift. I know secret ways to avoid the greatest dangers, and I can take you to free Glyvus. You cannot avoid each other in this long passageway, so you tell Cassandra to lead the way whilst you ponder her offer. The tunnel continues to wend downward, as if drawing you to Orb's deep, dark core. You continue along the long, narrow passageway with Cassandra creeping ahead to lead the way. The torch of Lumen casts a cold, white luminescence, as ascetic as the rocks closing in all around you. You both tense as the passageway opens up to a broadly circular chamber with an oval stone table in its centre, upon which stands a figure in black velvet robes. The far wall is covered by a bioluminescent sort of white moss. In the rock ceiling there is a long shaft above you to an upper level. The figure pulls back her hood a little to reveal her face. It is Foxglove, the former spy mistress of your city who came as Cassandra's prisoner to tell you about Glyvus's capture. I was waiting for you, Avenger, she says. And you are here too, Cassandra. I have a score to settle with you. Are you carrying an Onyx Spider token? I literally don't know. Otherwise, if you played Book 6 Inferno and had Foxglove exiled, that's an option. If you played Book 6 Inferno and she was killed, that's an option. If you played it and Foxglove otherwise journeyed separately from you, or you did not play Inferno, that is also an option. Now, I didn't have her killed on my successful playthrough, I don't think, but I definitely did have her killed when I was experimenting later, and that's the one that's the most interesting to find out what happens. So that's the one we're going to go for. What happens if Foxglove is supposed to be dead? You cannot be Foxglove, you say. You were slain. Foxglove steps down from the stone table. It seems that even death could not keep us apart, Avenger. The Black Widow placed me under a curse that compelled my spirit to return here to the Rift, to serve her even in death. For she is in league with the Lord of Sorrows. This body has been fashioned for me from blood that was taken before I left the Rift with that warrior woman. You and I can still escape this place together. But not you, Cassandra. You will die for your mistreatment of me. Cassandra crouches, ready to fight. Beware, Avenger. Whatever you think of me, that thing is no longer Foxglove. It serves only the Black Widow and wants to help it so it can turn on you. I only wish for freedom from this place, Foxglove says before turning to you. Cassandra will say anything to save herself. This is our chance for vengeance against her. Remember, she trapped your friend Glyvus in this place. No, I am your only hope to find him. Do you have the skill of Shin Ren, which is body language basically? That'll help. Otherwise, do you join Foxglove and attack Cassandra, join Cassandra and attack Foxglove, or stand off to the side and let nature take its course? Well, much as I would love to let these two ladies settle their own differences with a punch-up, I think that Foxglove has been subverted by the Black Widow, so I'm going to join Cassandra and attack Foxglove. Foxglove is the least trustworthy person in this entire series of books. If she told me water was wet, I would want to check. Foxglove steps back and shouts a command in a language you do not recognise. The bioluminescent white moss-like substance on the wall behind her reveals its true nature. It is not moss, but thousands of tiny spiders, suddenly animated. They twitch and swarm across the floor towards you. You leap onto the stone table and Cassandra follows suit, knocking aside Foxglove as she does. Well, this is exciting. Foxglove is jostled, and her black hood slips to reveal a spider on the back of her head, legs flexing, its swollen black abdomen resting against Foxglove's skull. It looks like an exact miniature of the Black Widow. "It is the Black Widow's spawn!" Cassandra shouts. "We must kill it!" Foxglove's appearance changes as the spider exerts control over her. Her eyes turn white, and her skin goes as pallid as a corpse. Meanwhile, you leap aside as thousands of small white spiders swarm towards you. Will you smash the sceptre into the Black Widow's spawn, launch a leaping tiger kick to incapacitate Foxglove, or try and reason with her? And there is a picture of Foxglove. It's reasonably good, actually. She's gone all goth. She seems to have found some black clothes to go with her new attitude. And this is fine. There's a perfectly adequate bit of art. Obviously much better than I could manage. But at the same time, it's not an illustration of the text. It's just a nice picture inspired vaguely by the text. And that shouldn't have been the assignment. Anyway, of these options, I like the idea of smashing the sceptre into the Black Widow's spawn to see if that interferes with its mind control, being, squashed. Foxglove's defense against your attack is 4 and none of your modifiers apply. So that's 2d6, try and get a 4 or more. I roll a 6, that is more than 4. If you fail, you're bitten by white spiders. Yeah, that's fine, I passed. If you're still alive, you may then attack again. It's effectively 2 4+ rolls. Oh, it's another 6. Excellent. And if you succeed this time, you smash the sceptre into the spawn of the Black Widow on Foxglove's skull and are splattered in ichor as it bursts. Foxglove falls to the floor and you hear a screech of anger from the far end of the tunnel where you escaped the Black Widow's lair. You and Cassandra waste no time against a swarm of white spiders and pull yourself up to the long shaft above. So we have successfully incapacitated Foxglove. That is encouraging. Will she be dead? We can only but hope. You pull yourself up to a high ledge and heave a loose basalt boulder over to block the shaft so the small spiders cannot get through. Cassandra stands beside you, overlooking a massive underground lake lit by an iridescent green from under the water. She regards you coolly. I have heard of this place. It is known as the Reaper's Plunge, Avenger, a swim that you would find most unpleasant. The air smells pungent and occasionally the water bubbles. You surmise that volcanic gas has turned the water here sulphuric. No doubt the acid would melt flesh from bone. There is a series of rock protrusions above the water to your left, almost like steps, that lead to a stone walkway by the lake. Alternatively, there is a cave to your right that leads on into the darkness. I am heading left, Avenger, Cassandra declares, hands on her hips, and if you want to save Glavis, you should too. So, do you have Shin Ren to see if she's telling the truth? I do not. So, otherwise our choices are follow her or abandon her. Well, we'll follow her because once you've decided that you're going to trust her to a point, I think you've got to go through with it. Cassandra leaps carefully along the stone protrusions, mindful of the lake of acid below. You do likewise and make it to the stone walkway which leads across an S-shaped passageway with a high ceiling. You continue for some time before Cassandra comes to an abrupt halt. By the light of the torch of Lumen you can see broken stones across the ground and a humanoid skeleton resting against a wall. The ceiling contains numerous sharp rocks jutting out precariously, ready to fall. After you, Avenger, she says with a sweep of her arm. Unlike you, I am in no rush to save anyone. Do you have the skill of picking locks, detecting and disarming traps? I do not. Otherwise, will you step carefully in case your passage could loosen more rocks, or rush past to minimise the risk of being caught in an avalanche? I think we'll be careful. Careful steps feels more ninja to me than rushing forwards. And This is probably the most prominent that your ninja skills have been for a couple of books now, and I'm absolutely here for it. I think what I wanted from this finale was definitely a summation of all the best bits of the previous series, and that includes focusing on the stuff that the system is best suited to model, and that's ninja stuff. And so far it's doing a bang-up job of that. You step carefully across the rocks, trying carefully not to set any trap off. Make a fate roll. If fate smiles on you, you make it across safely. Does fate smile on me? Yes, it does. So Cassandra picks her way across with minimal damage, a sheen of sweat glistening on her brow. She gives you a baleful sideways glance before leading the way further along the tunnel. The winding passageway opens out into a huge vaulted chamber, supported by pillars that disappear up beyond the light cast from the Torch of Lumen. There were once torches affixed to the pillars, but they have long since burnt away to charred stumps. Numerous archways form exits that lead on into the darkness. You see a human skeleton in the hall smashed to pieces, beside a broken, sword-shaped amulet. From further away you can just make out a glittering sword lying half covered in dust. Cassandra races in on the sword, and when she grabs it you see a blue spark. She suddenly recoils, wringing her hand. "A weapon blessed by a paladin," she sneers. "Truly the gods mock me." You have no problem touching the sword and inspect it. You do not recognise it as belonging to your friend Doré Lejeune, but you cannot be sure. Although you eschew using weapons, it seems a shame to leave such a holy artifact in this place of evil, so you strap it to your back. Add the paladin's sword to your character sheet. You snap into a combat stance as a tall, hulking fiend steps out from the darkness, white and hairless, with spikes adorning its exoskeleton. 2 leathery wings on its back twitch in anticipation. That is the only warning before it grabs Cassandra in a bear hug to drive its spikes into her. She kicks out and drives her head backwards into its dagger-like teeth, and with a roar of pain it hurls her against a pillar. It then charges in on you. Will you use an Iron Fist punch, if you can still punch, a Winged Horse kick, or a Dragon Tails throw? I might try a Dragon Tail throw, since it is charging me. Get it off balance, and then kick it in the head. That is my plan. You slide along the hall floor, aiming at the fiend's clawed feet below all of its upturned spines. The albino fiend has a defense against the dragon's tail throw of 6. It has a 22 endurance, and it deals 1 die in damage. So let's see if we hit with our throw. We have. If you have successfully thrown the fiend, you may use either an Iron Fist punch or a Winged Horse kick, adding 2 to your kick or punch modifier and damage for this attack only. So let's see what a kick in the head does for it. You twist your leg and deliver a shattering kick with the heel of your foot into the bony chin of your enemy. It's got a defense against the Winged Horse of 6. I can add +2 to my roll. I get a 10. It means I can deal 1 die, I believe, +4 damage. Total of 7 damage, taking it down to 15 endurance. Every time you score a hit on the fiend, you must roll a further dice, and on a 5 to 6, you cut yourself on one of its spines and must lose 1 endurance. I roll a 4 and I'm fine. If you reduce the fiend to 8 endurance or less, something happens, otherwise it tries to grab and bite at my neck. Defense against this is 8, so we try and roll under our defense. No, we've been hit, so we will try and block. We do successfully, which means that we now get to kick with a -2 modifier, and that kick misses. You've seen here perfectly everything that's awesome about the combat system in Way of the Tiger, and everything that's a bit irritating about the combat system in Way of the Tiger, as we initially get to excitingly throw the monster to the ground and then deliver a shattering kick to the head. And that's an amazing narrative experience. But then we're just right back to just rolling dice over and over again, waiting for something to happen. So I'm going to pause the recording there while I do that last bit. Be back in just a moment because I'm going to roll some dice. I have successfully reduced the albino fiend to 8 endurance or less. I took a further 2 damage during the fracas, and that has reduced my endurance to 12. The fiend staggers, and Cassandra leaps up behind it and smashes a rock two-handed against its head, breaking it like an egg, white blood oozing out like pus. That's a good image. I was tempted to watch you and that thing beat each other to death, she says, but I could not have you claim a kill on what attacked me. The spluttering light from a torch approaches from one of the archways and you both whirl to see that it is Tybalt arriving, his white robes bedraggled and torn, but otherwise unharmed. His expression turns from joy at seeing you to outrage at noticing Cassandra. Outnumbered and weaponless, she snaps off 2 spines from the fiend, one of which she hurls at you before she races away through another archway. You avoid it with ease, as Tybalt starts over to your side. Thus the wicked shrink from the righteous light of Avatar, Tybalt calls out. If you have any wounds, he chants a prayer softly, that you feel yourself uplifted by Avatar essence of light. You may restore up to 8 lost endurance points, and any injury to your face, hands or leg inflicted by the Black Widow is healed, negating all penalties you suffered from this. So that's nice. That actually gets us back up to full health. You thank him and offer your sympathies over Vesper's demise. He will be avenged, Tybalt promises. As soon as I find my comrades, Toffler and I were ambushed by dark elves and became separated. Then I came across a large, dark stalagmite back that way. It must be the Forbidden Sanctuary that holds Glyvus. But we could team up, you and I, and first gain revenge against Cassandra while she's unarmed. So, will you head on to seek Glyvus by Tybalt's instructions, leaving Tybalt to look for his missing comrades, or team up with Tybalt to hunt down Cassandra? Well, I think we need to focus on the main mission rather than getting sidetracked by trying to kick a particularly aggravating and treacherous woman to death. So I think we will follow the instructions and look for Glyvus. After some distance you emerge to find yourself close to a dark stalagmite mound jutting out like a giant rotten tooth, its surface wet and glistening from water that drips onto it from the cavern roof high above. As you close, you see that the stalagmite is etched with runes that indicate that this is indeed the Forbidden Sanctuary, the place that you are told houses Glyvus. It has numerous, thin, painless windows cut into its surface, and the entrance is marked by imposing stone double doors. Note that if you have the plague, you must lose 2 endurance here from the debilitating effects. If you still live, read on. I read on because I'm fine. I am the picture of health. The hairs on the nape of your neck tingle, and you turn around to look across the misshapen mounds and shark-tooth stalactites for any danger. Then you see it, slowly crawling across the shadowy cavern roof. It's the Black Widow herself, heading for the large, dark mound. On the ground below her is a blur of movement, red and black like ants, her host of servants and soldiers from the 7th tier attending to her in her moment of need. You race over to the mound and vault up to one of the lower level windows. It is protected by individual gossamer-like strands that doubtless set off an alarm, but you find one window where they have already been loosened so you can slip past. You consider that someone has already found a way in as you enter, your eyes adjusting to the torchlit gloom. If you have a Daughter of Nullac spider in your head, it wriggles under your brain as if excited to be entering this area. Either way, you continue on. I'm going to say I don't have a spider in my head because I don't want to think about a spider wriggling in my brain. Thank you very much. The corridor is dank and filled with a distant, slow, wheezing sound. You slink onwards, senses straining, muscles tensed. You search for any stairs down, but there is no basement level here in this hollowed-out rock formation where a dungeon may be. The next corridor is awash with waist-deep water, and you must wade across it. Even if you have the climbing skill, the ceiling here is solid stone, and so you cannot get a purchase. You remove your soft, tabby shoes and roll up the legs of your trousers as you step in. You feel a dread chill. This water in the stronghold of Nulak has the properties of holy or, you muse, unholy water. If you do not bear an amulet of Nulak, you must lose 1 point of inner force permanently. Note that on your character sheet, your inner force may never be more than 4 until you find redemption. If you do bear such an amulet, you are tainted by the water but have already suffered Nulak's curse and suffer no further effects here. So my max inner force is now 4, which is fine because my inner force is 3, which is less than 4 anyway. Either way, you wade carefully through the water with barely a ripple, and once through, you dry off your legs as best you can before rolling down the legs of your trousers and placing on your shoes again. When you step onwards, your dry footsteps leave no trail on the dry floor. You arrive at a T-junction. Do you want to head left to the main corridor where the slow wheezing sound is emanating? Or head right on the side corridor where you see a smear of blood along the black floor? So, a straight left-right decision, and tradition requires that I turn left when such an opportunity is presented. Other than the combat system, I have found basically nothing to complain about in this opening portion of this adventure. It's just been great. I hope you're enjoying it. I think this is absolutely tremendous. It's really improved as well by the fact that you're thrown straight into the action, right into this awful dark dungeon, and there's no distractions, there's no messing about, there's no going to buy things from a market. It's just straight into the good stuff right from the start, and I love that. The added benefits of ending your last book on a mean-spirited cliffhanger because your 7th book was suddenly cancelled. You traverse the corridor and then suddenly crouch into a shadowy alcove as 2 dark elf priestesses pass. Then you advance again, slipping in through a gauze curtain into a hallway with bronze double doors guarded by 2 figures in grey plate mail armour, features hidden beneath metal masks and helmets, sickles on their belts. The wheezing that greeted your entry into the Forbidden Sanctuary is coming from a giant creature in apparent slumber, atop a horrific ornate gold and onyx statue that you take to be the goddess Nulak. Water trickles from the ceiling over the creature, giving its grey skin a glistening sheen. The monster's squid-like head is reminiscent of a kraken, but with a spider-like body. You cannot be sure, but you think it sometimes whispers things you cannot quite catch. 4 emaciated dark elf slaves slump in brass chains at the base of the statue, scratching at their own bleeding eyes and moaning softly. You feel the creature's presence weighing on your mind. You grip the sceptre tighter, feeling its power keep the evil at bay, stopping you from slipping into insanity. You concentrate on getting past the guards. Do you have the poison needle skill, and do you wish to use it at a gap in the armour of the guards? I certainly do. Don't care what the other options are. Poison needles, automatically a favourite. It's my favourite skill. You use your blowpipe to spit out 2 poison needles in quick succession into the unarmoured necks of the guards. Whoever they are, they waver and then slump to the ground, but you have already raced in to catch them and ease them down silently. You check that the giant creature is still slumbering and step lightly through the bronze double doors. I feel like this is going very well by my usual standards of recorded playthrough. Traditionally by now I would be a limping, disease-riddled wreck, but my health is still at 20. Okay, I've used up my super duper poison for special occasions, but otherwise I'm in really good shape. You enter the sanctum of the Forbidden Sanctuary, a hall lit by a dull circle of flame set into an onyx wall reminiscent of a setting sun. The black stone here is veined with white, giving the appearance of knitting or webbing. The floor is awash with black, knee-deep water, presumably blessed holy water of Nulak. You creep forwards. From alcoves at the side step a handful of grey armoured guards, but they are held in check by the command of a woman who appears on a raised platform by a sacrificial altar. She is dressed in black and has a black snake around her neck, which occasionally coils and twitches. She carries a candle in her hand and appears in no discomfort as the wax drips onto her open palm. You see, as someone who worships in a very high Anglican church, I know for a fact that wax dripping from a reasonably sized candle is not particularly painful. It just feels warm. It doesn't feel problematic. Okay, you end up with wax stuck to your hand that you have to peel off later, but yeah, I know my way around a religious candle. It's fine. "Welcome, Avenger," she says, stepping down into the water in front of you. "Kwon himself must walk with you to have guided you here. It is said that you slew my former master Shadazar during the invasion of your city, a feat I have only just come to accept. In her absence, I am the keeper of the Forbidden Sanctuary. If you are wearing a priest's robe, you discard it as it avails you little here. You ask her why she does not oppose you. You have overcome all the challenges of the rift to be here. There is nothing more I can do to stop you. Your presence represents a greater cosmological battle underway between the gods, who are undergoing a reordering of their supremacy. You and I are but instruments in their struggle. In our secret archive," the Keeper continues, "there is a prophecy of a mortal with one eye deciding the fate of the gods. That is why the Black Widow fears you. Recalling your recovery of the scrolls of Kitsuin, you comment that you were influencing the fate of the gods long before you lost your left eye. No matter. I will take you to see Glyvus now." She turns away from you and starts to walk. Do you want to grab her to hold as a hostage to ensure she takes you to Glyvus? Follow her to see where she leads you, remaining wary for treachery, or launch a leaping tiger kick into the back of her head? The last one is very funny, but I think it ends with me being brutally murdered by a bunch of guards who are only held in check by her say-so. So I think we will go with the following to see where she leads, remaining wary from treachery, because that just feels like the most action movie sort of thing to do. The Keeper walks out of the water onto the raised platform, where she places the candle on the altar. She gestures back over her shoulder towards a window. "From here you can behold the fabled city of Bone, which no man has ever seen and lived to make it to the sunlit world." You give her a nudge in the back with your scepter to keep her moving. She continues on through a black velvet curtain. You push past the black velvet curtain into a spacious hall of obsidian, lit by the reverse side of the dull fire disk in the wall. Along the side are numerous alcoves blocked by octopus-like creatures, their heads above the doorframe, their spiked tentacles forming something akin to thick prison bars. Only once before has an intruder infiltrated a temple this far down, she says. A group of suicidal crusaders who took a sacred talisman from the followers of death near the city of Bone. The survivors still pay for their temerity to this day. The keeper walks over to one of the creatures and whispers in some guttural language that you would not believe pronounceable by human tongue. So I was right, I guess, with the Welsh accent there. The creature gathers its tentacles upwards, revealing a rectangular block of dark ice. From a sash at her waist, the keeper produces a squid-shaped amulet of Nulak. She touches it to the ice, which immediately transforms into water, gushing over the floor, revealing the gaunt and emaciated form of Glyvus. He falls straight to the ground within his cell, too weak to stand, his green clothing little more than rags. His eyes struggle to focus, and he seems to recognise you. Your prize, Avenger, the keeper says, stepping back with a smile, although in reality he is your doom. I am curious enough to let you take him, for the forces of the Black Widow surround this place. How can you carry him beyond them and up 7 tiers of the rift? You are but a human. I cannot see how you can fulfill the prophecy. My faith in our prophecy is tested. Will you help Glyvus out of the cell before she changes her mind? Demand that the keeper help him? Smash the scepter into her smiling face? Or throw the onyx spider token at the keeper if you have it? I do not have it. So I guess we will continue to sort of just allow the narrative to carry us on by helping Glyvus out of the cell before she changes her mind. You rush in to aid your dear friend, helping him to his feet. So the prophecy proves false, the keeper says, and the octopus-like creature drops its tentacles down to trap you in the cell. I have you and the scepter, Avenger, without any real effort at all. My ascension to rule is assured. You try to move the tentacles blocking you, but every time you do so you are hit with a powerful electrical shock from the creature. You realise you will be trapped here in the Forbidden Sanctuary at the pleasure of the Keeper. The Keeper has the scepter. She will be the new master of the Rift. Soon she will lead her forces out to conquer the sunlit world as well. The end. I'm not going to invoke the sausagey finger bookmark rule, even though that might wind up being a slightly shorter adventure than normal. That just felt like a very appropriate place to call a halt. I had such a good time with that. What a banger of an opening attempt, quite honestly. Okay, so you can call me extraordinarily gullible for falling for what might be one of the most obvious traps in the whole series, but at the same time, it's a really, really cool ending. I really like it as a failure mode, so that really caps off the audio playthrough in, I think, the perfect way. And I do quite like it when the audio playthrough finishes in a definitive way rather than me just kind of having to stop, because otherwise editing the podcast will take about 1,000 years. So that is Way of the Tiger Redeemer. I am thrilled by this book. I wouldn't call it a return to form because all of the books have been at least very enjoyable in some fashion or another, but I will say that it feels like a return to my favourite elements of the earlier series, and that's just been an absolute treat. So I'm going to go away, I'm going to play it on my own time. I will be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye! I have finished Way of the Tiger Redeemer. In some ways, it's a very easy book to review because it's great and you should play it if you get the chance. Drilling down into the details, though, there's 3 different elements at play in why this book succeeds. The first is simply that it's good in isolation. The second is that it's a good sequel to Inferno. And the third is that it's good as a conclusion to the Way of the Tiger series. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but because it broadly succeeds in all three of those elements, I emerged from playing it feeling extremely warm towards the book. After a 27-year wait, I think what people wanted was something which would remind them why Way of the Tiger was cool and give an appropriate sense of closure, and that is exactly what we got. In terms of Redeemer being good in isolation, you've got some very solid fundamental design skills on display here. There's lots of opportunities to use ninja skills and ninja kit, and the structure of the book allows for multiple different ways to approach the story, while still delivering the big plot beats that are necessary to give a coherent narrative structure. Now, someone who likes to see game books balance both player agency with a strong overarching plot, this is doing a really good job of delivering both. The decisions that are on offer are interesting, though there's necessarily a lot of stuff that depends on what happens in previous books, which I will address later. I like the structure a lot because it flings you straight into the action and inverts the usual narrative structure of the fantasy game book. Usually you'll be starting off somewhere more or less civilized, gathering supplies and information, and then heading off to find the dungeon before descending into it for a confrontation with the big bad at the end. This starts you off fighting the big bad before trying to escape the dungeon and make your way home, where it turns out, rather like in The Lord of the Rings, things have changed for the worse since your absence. We've seen that kind of structure before in books like Creature of Havoc, which probably has the strongest opening of any fighting fantasy book, but this is perhaps the purest example of the inverted structure I've seen so far, and it makes the book feel very fresh because even in 2014, that kind of thing was very uncommon. I would love to see more game books play around with narrative structure in this way. Okay, in the case of Redeemer, it only makes sense because of the groundwork that Inferno laid, but the fact remains that this is a strong and imaginative layout for a book. There's also a whole bunch of fun encounters and challenges within the book as well. The Rift remains a fantastic setting for a dungeon delve, filled with all manner of weird beasts and deadly traps. I especially liked sneaking past the dreaming monster surrounded by slaves, slowly going mad. That is a powerful image right there. What I think elevates these sections here are all the various characters you can run into throughout your travels through the Rift. Having all the NPCs, except poor Headless Vesper, escape from the Black Widow and scatter into different directions, that creates a range of interesting encounters later, as you can run into them in various different places, at various different times, and in various different configurations. It reminds me a little of the way you can run into other competitors in Death Trap Dungeon, although slightly better developed, and actually the Rift as a whole feels a bit like Death Trap Dungeon in parts. There's a great mixture of NPCs, friends and foes that you can encounter, and I was delighted to see that Doré Lejeune's story does get completed, since that was a very odd absence in Inferno. The plot arguably leans a little too hard towards things and people being disguised as other things and or people. By the time you get back to Erzmancast, you'll have seen enough people who weren't what they seemed, not least Foxglove, that finding out there's a fake Avenger who's been pretending to rule Erzmancast since shortly after you left feels a bit too familiar, but that's by the by. I think, if we're talking about issues, balance does rear its ugly head again, despite some effort having gone into the fights to make them feel less random. There's a lot more attacks that deal specific amounts of damage rather than the random rolls, for example, but it is still quite easy to end up dying from accumulated endurance loss. The best fights here are fantastic. There's one where you get to choose from every single different attack that you know, rather than just one punch, one kick and one throw, and that helps make that fight feel more like a game of chess with your opponent, which I really liked, and a suitably dramatic escalation of ninja skills. The opening battle with the Black Widow is also superb, since you're trying to escape rather than kill the monstrous ruler of the Rift, and that changing up the outcome of the fight really makes it feel fresh as well. Some of the other fights necessarily feel a bit flat in comparison, and I think that showcases how the system works best with a small number of intricately designed fights rather than using fights as filler, which works perfectly well in fighting fantasy. In Inferno, we saw a very small number of fights, but they were all really well developed, and that felt to me like the strongest iteration of the combat system in the whole run. I think it's one of those situations where, at its best, the Way of the Tiger combat system is so good that you almost owe it to yourself to just do the really fantastic stuff and not try and use it to bulk out encounters. And it's not too much of an issue that the fights here can be an easy way to an early grave, because fights aside, there's not a huge amount here that makes the book super challenging. There is one proper item check in the Rift. You're going to need one specific item, and another one will be very helpful. But the most important item is not massively hard to come by. Similarly, once you get out of the Rift, there's a few different ways to approach the finale, where it becomes clear you'll need to struggle to regain control of Ursmancast. I think it is technically possible to make the game unwinnable based on decisions you made in a previous book, which feels like an issue, but I suppose technically you can always go back and replay the previous book in order to avoid those specific traps. Overall, though, the difficulty feels manageable outside of the fights, and there's not that many instant deaths to worry about along the way. While we're tidying up the fundamentals, it's also a masterclass in how to write for the most important bits of your narrative. This is a skill I've come to consider increasingly important in gamebook design. The ability to gloss over the least interesting elements to focus your attention solely on those aspects which generate the opportunity to make interesting decisions. Redeemer is really solidly written on every level, but what stands out is how quickly it moves from one set piece to another, while still conveying a good sense of the space between them. That is a real skill, and it's something I find myself striving for more and more each time I start a new gamebook. It's not without costs. You do lose a smidge of immersion by not taking every opportunity to give the player a choice, but I think it is a worthwhile sacrifice. It's also a personal taste issue too. I don't mind the way the pacing speeds up and slows down as you zoom in and out of the action, but I could totally see that as an issue if you prefer a more consistent experience. It is, however, impossible to consider this book entirely on its own merit, since it is so bound up with the rest of the series. There's lots of moments where your previous actions will have an impact on the present situation, though I do think the writers possibly overestimate people's ability to remember the specifics of previous books they may have played multiple times to different outcomes quite a while ago. It's not a big issue. If in doubt, I just pick the one that sounded the most familiar, or the one that sounded most interesting. I appreciate the attempts to call back to previous books, but it highlights the difficulty of writing around branching narratives, especially if you don't know ahead of time what's going to turn out to be important. I think it succeeds really well when it's just referencing Inferno, and this is essentially the second half of Inferno. Let's not beat about the bush. If you want the very finest experience, you really need to play Inferno and Redeemer back to back. So I think you're going to be able to remember more or less what you did in Inferno, but earlier books can be more of a challenge. In an ideal world, you'd track this sort of thing with keywords and items, but that's not always practical because you don't always know what you're going to want to call back to. I do think it might have been worth generating the odd trinket here and there when you hit big plot points. That would have provided some useful grounding for tracking some stuff on the character sheet rather than just in the player's head. And you know that I'm a big fan, where possible, of getting stuff out of the player's head and onto the character sheet where it's more amenable to mechanics. So what we do get in Redeemer is a bunch of characters we've encountered before making an appearance. Thaum, Tybalt, Cassandra, Foxglove are all welcome returning villains, just as Eris, Tuffler, Vesper and the assortment of Ursmancast NPCs from previous books are welcome returning allies to a greater or lesser extent. There's a few little references to the fighting fantasy book Talisman of Death as well, which is nice for the completists. It's great to be able to rescue Glyvus and see Doré Lejeune again, but the narrative does still find space to include a couple of new characters, which I think is important so that it's not just nostalgia and callbacks. Honestly, the use of characters from previous books is mostly an absolute highlight here. There's stuff for all of them to do. I especially like how you can end up giving Glyvus the Sceptre of Rulership, and then everyone will start ignoring you and just kind of doing whatever he says, because it's the magical Sceptre of Rulership. That's a lovely detail, as are several bits with Foxglove, who is one of my favourite villains, because she has no redeeming features whatsoever. There's a lot to be said for just throwing a bunch of different characters into a situation where they can't trust each other, but they also have somewhat aligned goals like not dying and not dying really, really horribly. If I'm feeling critical, there is a section where you have to go on a vision quest type deal, and in your spirit form you wind up running into the spirits of various enemies that you've fought and killed before, and that sequence tips over into self-indulgent nostalgia for me. It is just a parade of reminders of things that happened in other books, and it doesn't advance the plot or lead to anything interesting, and I didn't find it particularly mechanically interesting, although it did sort of try and come up with a way of operationalising your spirit body that was, I guess, kind of interesting, but ultimately it feels like a Star Wars prequel, and not in a good way. Once you get back to Ursmancast, it seems there's been an attempt to recapture the third book, Usurper. On one level, this is a broadly sensible decision. It's arguably one of the strongest books in the series, the point where the balance between doing the ninja stuff that the system is designed to promote managed to tie in pretty seamlessly with doing other stuff. It's a good reference point, and there's some good elements in there. I especially like that you can finally get the Temple of Time to pull their finger out and do something, even if it does require your acquiescence to allowing them to continue to be smug, superior jackasses in perpetuity once the current crisis is averted. Overall, the climax does feel less imaginative than the stuff set in the Rift, which is gloriously over the top and surreal, but the climax still does land as a satisfying conclusion to the series, while giving you one last opportunity to do your ninja shtick once you've assembled a new support base to overthrow your evil doppelganger. There's a great fight with Force Lady Gwyneth that's given the added spice where you don't actually want to snap her neck because she's mistaken about you but not actually evil. I quite like the finale because although it's a little bit of a rehearsal of past glories, it does manage to convey some of that same political flavour that stood out in Usurper, Overlord and Warbringer without getting bogged down too much in the details of rulership. Ultimately, the resolution comes from sneaking about and roundhouse kicking people in the head, and I couldn't ask for anything more than that. It also provides closure whilst leaving plenty of dangling threads for future stories, and I do like to see that. I'm not the biggest fan of things finishing too neatly. I like it when there's space for another chapter, so long as that chapter doesn't feel necessary. That's a fine balancing act to pull off, but I think Redeemer lands it admirably. I was very happy with how it all shook out. Where does that leave us with regard to the series as a whole? I think it leaves me feeling pretty good. There's a cautionary lesson in the series as a whole about designing systems that only model certain aspects of the world. I find that interesting. As soon as you move away from those ninja systems, you run into problems with players feeling shortchanged if their characters' core talents aren't being utilised. And I definitely felt that way when I was playing Overlord in particular. If you've built up your kick and punch modifiers and learned the new fancy Quan's flail attack, it can feel frustrating not being given the chance to use them. At the same time, you have to respect the desire of the authors to change things up and break new ground, because that is an important part of any long-running series, and it certainly helps the different books stand out from each other. The problem is how you provide mechanical support for that. The approach that Smith and Thompson take is to basically not worry about it too much, and I have some sympathy with that. Now, Fighting Fantasy, those books would have generated some kind of new stat for Overlord to reflect your growing or waning influence, and doubtless done something to reflect mechanically your ability to command troops in battle in Warbringer. And that's fine, in a series that doesn't worry too much about continuing with the same character. But in an ongoing narrative, you want to be careful about multiplying systems, particularly if you're going to make those systems perpetual. And in fact, if you want to just make them appear for one book, their disappearance can also feel pretty odd. You can end up in a situation like World of Warcraft, where each expansion creates new mechanics that are extremely important for that expansion, and then broadly become irrelevant as soon as another expansion comes out, but still need to be tracked, creating an increasingly convoluted mess of interlinking systems that become more and more impenetrable as time goes on. Gamebooks are much simpler than video games, certainly much simpler than MMORPGs, but the same problems can start applying, and it can end up making your later books feel very unwelcoming to new players. One thing that might have helped would have been to write a more open-ended system that made it possible to model slightly more than just jumping about and spitting poison needles. That might have improved the experience of later books, but it would have come at the cost of those more focused early books in the series. They would have been significantly less compelling, and I don't think I'd want to trade the experience of doing hardcore ninja nonsense in those early books for anything. They could maybe have used items and skills to bridge the gap, and we do see a tiny bit of that, but they never got super into it, and I think that's because it creates both balance problems and new player experience problems. The balance problems are obvious enough. Early books give you new skills and bonuses to attack modifiers. Later books don't continue the process, and I think it's because balancing around both a new character and a character who's developed their stats and skills gets progressively harder and harder the more potential bonuses you're giving out. It's the same with skills. It's hard to justify making a new skill as impactful as the original skills if there's no way for a new player to get it without playing the previous books. And if you just then hand out those skills to new players, it devalues the experience of the older players who've had to jump through hoops to learn basket weaving or mime artistry or whatever. Ultimately, I think the approach they took was more or less the best option, but it does vividly illustrate that there's no absolute right answers in game design that don't come with an additional cost attached. I think they could have put in a few more ninja skill checks in some of the later books, but a lot of those books are crammed full of the things they really wanted to include, so it's hard to see how you could fit those skill checks in without diluting the political machinations of Overlord or the battlefield complexities of Warbringer, and both of those things were pretty awesome. Probably the best thing would have been to breach the 420 paragraph limit, but the realities of publishing don't always make that kind of decision possible. Obviously, part of what makes Way of the Tiger work as well as it does is the world. It's a rich and fully developed world that is distinctive and has a way of naming things that feels halfway between mystical enlightenment and an episode of Catchphrase. Probably dating myself there. I've said before that I very much like how present religion is in the setting. All the big characters have an approach to the world that is informed by their faith, whether that's a preference for freedom, healing, wisdom, martial valour, or simply being very evil all of the time for no clear reason. Even those characters who aren't described as being followers of a specific god, like the demagogue, seem driven by a philosophical perspective. There's also a sense of different cities, even in the same region, having something of a distinct culture, which I do appreciate, and that's also partly governed by their unique makeup of different religious groups. Orb is very much a classic fantasy world on one level, but it has a certain earnestly mystical quality that gives it its own flavour, and it's something very different from fighting fantasies down at heel and grubby early modern take on fantasy. There's something a bit more sincere, I think, about the Way of the Tiger series. It doesn't have that British sense of irony to quite such a degree. It's not trading in the pathetic aesthetic to anything like the same extent. And honestly, that's very refreshing and gives it its own unique flavour. It's been a blast playing these books in order for the first time, and I'm really pleased that they finish as strongly as they do. It's a series that's well worth your time, and one I will probably revisit at some point simply to enjoy again. Smith and Thompson, ably assisted at points by Walters, are to be congratulated on an epic story that stands out as one of the finest series in the annals of game books. The special editions are lovely objects, albeit marred by some very dubious art direction choices, but thankfully there's affordable digital or print-on-demand versions which make the whole series fully accessible, and that is a tremendous joy to me. I have no problem with there being collectible editions of game books that command high prices on the secondary market, but more than anything I want game books, especially classics like this, to be available for everyone to enjoy as I have. That is all for this episode. Join me next time when we'll be venturing into the world of Steve Jackson's Sorcery, the more adult-oriented but still extremely fighting fantasy series of game books. I hope you will join me for that. In the meantime, you can contact me via email on hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky @hjdoom. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.